everybody, and welcome into the H&M Trucking Podcast, episode 52. And I will say that episode 52, while it's not as crazy, important, and fun to me as episode 50 was as a milestone, 52 episodes, 52 weeks in a year, we just hit our big one-year anniversary here on the H&M Trucking Podcast. So let's hear a party horn! And an eagle screech. And why not this one too?
I'm gonna rise up, I'm gonna kick a little ass, gonna kick some ass in the USA, gonna climb a mountain, gonna soar a flag, gonna fly on an eagle, I'm gonna kick some butt, I'm gonna drive a big truck, I'm gonna rule this world, I'm gonna kick some ass, I'm gonna rise up, I'm gonna kick a little ass, rock, flag, and eagle.
Oh, it feels good. 52 big episodes with you guys. Thank you all so much for keeping me around here and helping keep you entertained. You guys are a giant part of this podcast, too. We went through all of the mushy stuff back in episode 50 when we celebrated the big milestone. This is another milestone along the way, and so thank you to everyone at H&M Trucking for having us around. We are having a blast. Let's get to some of our new drivers real quick because we are tight on time today. We've got a lot to get to in this episode. Let's welcome Jimmy Braddock. He's a van driver to the team. We've also got Bryant Radiff. He's also a van driver. David Magoniel, welcome him to the van division as well. And finally, last but certainly not least, we've got hopper driver Tammy Kilby. Welcome to the party, Tammy. We wish all of you a very warm welcome and safe travels out there on the road. Thanks for becoming a part of H&M Trucking. You are on one hell of a team. I'll just put it that way. I mean, how many other trucking companies have you driven for that have their own podcast? Excuse me while I throw my shoulder out, patting myself on the back. What are we doing today? Well, we're actually telling you a story about predatory towing that happened right here to H&M Trucking. Predatory towing is something that has been in the news quite frequently lately, and we'll even bring you a news story towards the end of the show about a company out in Memphis, Tennessee that is definitely in a little bit of hot water for the way that they have been treating some people when it comes to towing their big rigs. So without further ado, I want to get to our interviews. We're going to talk to driver Bryan Allen, who's been working for H&M for a while now, and also his dispatcher, Stacy Trively. And they're going to tell us a story about when Bryan had to put up with this. And you guys, it's a little more hair-raising. Like you think, oh, what'd you do? Get a big bill? Trust me, there's a lot more to it than that. So we're going to get to that right now. Stay tuned for some breaking news at the end that also has to do with predatory towing. And we're going to hear from safety claims specialist Destinee Andrews, who was also involved in this situation. You guys, this is crazy, and I've barely got enough time to finish this sentence, so let's get to it.
From Omaha, Nebraska, to whatever lane you're driving, this is the H&M Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
Very excited about this next segment here on the H&M Trucking Podcast. I have H&M driver Bryan Allen on the line. Bryan, thank you for being here today.
Yes, thank you.
And I also have dispatcher Stacy Trively on the line. Stacy, thank you so much for being here with us as well.
Hi, well, thanks for having us.
Of course. Now, we're talking about predatory towing today on the show. There is a lot of news that's been going on. I've seen lawsuits. I've seen extensive reporting on predatory towing practices happening all over the United States. And the reason we brought you two on today is because you've got a little story to tell that has to do with this garbage practice. And I'm hoping that what we can get out of this is just a few things that other drivers might be able to hear and say, hey, I can look out for that, and hopefully keep this from happening to any other drivers with any frequency at H&M. So, Bryan, I'm going to go ahead and start with you and just have you tell me the story. How did you get into the situation where you needed to call a tow truck, and what happened from there?
Sure. We didn't actually have to call a tow truck. We needed backup from the police. Let me see. This was a load that I pulled from St. Joseph, Missouri, was going to a co-op in Indiana. It was a long shift, obviously, and at the end of a 12 or 14-hour day, I needed to find a place to stop for the night. And just on my radar, there was a Walmart supercenter. It turns out it was in a city called Lafayette, Indiana. And so I pulled in. It was a giant parking lot that could accommodate trucks, and there was actually another truck there, and I pulled close to his truck and trailer and shut it down for the night. That may have been about 9 or 10 o'clock. I think I went inside and got a couple of things from Walmart, and then I went out to my truck to go lay down. So I was completely lights out. I was probably in the middle of a dream or something, and there was a pounding on the driver's side, and somebody was pounding on it. That it very much sounded like the highway patrol or the city police. So I jumped out of the bunk and went down and opened the door, and there was a man standing there. And it was just one of the weirdest things that I've seen in 15 years of trucking. It was a man standing there with a sign that said, I think the sign said something like Interstate Parking Enforcement, and it had a 10-digit phone number on it. And he was holding it up over his face, is the thing. And I said, what do you want? And he said, you've been booted. And I said, well, and at that moment, I didn't realize where the boot was. I said, where is it? The reason I didn't know was because the windshield was covered up with my blinds. Mm-hmm. So he goes, you've been booted. Call the phone number. I can't answer any questions. That's how I jumped out of the truck. And that's when I seen the device that he had. Somehow he had climbed up on the front of the truck, standing on the steer tire. And they had put this great big yellow device that covered the entire windshield. He wasn't kidding. And then he was kind of laughing or smiling or something. He said, "Don't you dare touch it, because it'll pop your windshield. You just call my boss and they'll get all of this straightened out," or something. And they weren't kidding. This device that they put on, it was called a barnacle, and it was bright yellow. And when you're looking at it from the inside, it looks like an abalone oyster shell or something. And it's got these. It's like a suitcase that unfolds, and they stick it to the windshield, and it's got these two giant suction cups on it with a big warning that you can see inside the vehicle, and it says, "Don't touch it, because it'll it'll shatter the windshield." Mm-hmm. And so we called the company. I called my company. This was at 2 a.m. It's at 2 a.m. and somebody answered. The instructions was to get on the floor and get away from the windows and call the police. The Lafayette Police Department, they seemed to know what was going on. And they said something like, "Ha, this happens like every single night. We'll be right out there." In the meantime, I actually turned on the motor and tried to drive off. But you can't get away from these guys. Once they get this thing on the windshield, it is just blinding. That you can't get away from them. It's not safe to drive.
Sure.
You can't hardly drive 2 or 3 miles an hour. And and they of course they followed me to the other side of the parking lot. And I think a few minutes later the police showed up, and the police were completely useless. They said something like, "Oh, it's a civil issue. We see this every single night. You guys are just out of luck. Apparently, we can't force them to take that thing off. Indeed, if you do touch that thing, it'll crack, it'll shatter the windshield." So I think this started about 2 a.m. So now it's going on 3-something a.m. And I told my company right here, there's a great big crack on the windshield anyway. I mean, we might as well just tear this thing off and see what happens. And the company, the folks with safety, they said the same thing. They said, do everything you can, because we don't want to pay these people. We don't want to pay them like $1,000 to pull this thing off. We're not doing that. Mm-hmm. The value, the cost of replacing the windshield is maybe $200 or $300, and it already has a pretty big crack on it. So it was already getting to be, we're going to need to replace it anyway. the police right there, he did tell me something kind of interesting. He said, try turning on the defroster. Just turn on the defroster, turn it up full blast and see if that helps. That did eventually when we got it off, that was very helpful. So that's the advice that I have for people. Now, I used a pair of channel locks to try to tear this thing off, and they're not kidding. It instantly popped the windshield. It popped the windshield like in such a way I've never seen, right? That, 18 inches top to bottom, every single direction. Like it did. The windshield didn't explode. We were actually able to drive on it later on. We didn't have to have it replaced right there. What were you going to ask me?
Actually, it was exactly what I was going to ask, is if it was rendered to the point where you couldn't drive with it, or if you were still able to actually get down the road a little bit and start to worry about getting it fixed.
We were able to leave the scene. We were able to continue operations for about a day and a half. However, it shattered the windshield in such a way that if I had to cross a live scale, it would have been an out of service.
Sure.
Because it's dangerous. It was wildly obvious, and it's actually quite dangerous to drive around like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a pair of channel locks that got the device off. The channel locks plus the defroster got the device off, but it shattered the windshield. Now, in retrospect, I'll tell you a very interesting tool that may have done it. If anybody ever falls into the same circumstance that I did, try going into like the Walmart and get like a 18 inch ruler that's made of aluminum that has a nice long blade,
mm-hmm.
and just very, very gently push it under the lip of the clamshell. And all you have to do is just barely touch the rubber part of that suction thing, and it instantly breaks the suction. So that's how I got it off. Even with hold on, I think I told the story out of order. I actually used a blade to break the suction on it, but that was using the blade in my left hand and using the channel locks in my right hand. Was able to pull it up after the windshield was broken and then break the seal and then get that device off. Now, the story didn't end right there. The guy came over, and this was a great big, he's a well-built, he was a robber. He was like a professional robber, and he was also packing a gun. I know that. And the moment that the device came off was when he came over and got really aggressive, saying, give me the device and all of that. And I was scared that he was going to try to put the device right back on the truck, not on the windshield this time, but maybe on the driver's side window, which would have just made our problems 10 times worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he put it on the windshield, which is $200 or $300 to repair, but if he had put that on the driver's side power window, that'd have been $1,000 to replace that. And we may have wanted to pay them to take that thing off. I don't want to give those robbers any good ideas, but windshields are only $200 or $300 to repair, but a driver's side power window, that's like $1,000 probably.
Mm-hmm.
Very stressful experience, obviously.
It sounds like it. Now, did you guys ever talk to like the management at the Walmart or anything like that to see if they had anything to do with this, or were these just some miscreants hanging out in the parking lot just looking for an easy target?
Stacy, do you know the answer to that?
Well, I didn't ever talk to them, but I thought that they had been arrested. Didn't you say the police arrested them?
Well, or
was it for having the gun? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he pulled a gun. He said, give me my device back. And I actually got the device locked into, when I seen him coming across the parking lot, I ran over to the passenger side, shoved it in the passenger side, locked the door, and the dude had a gun right there. I ran from the scene and ran over to these police. The police are just standing there watching this whole thing, and they thought it was funny, but I finally told them, dude, he just pulled a gun on me. And that's when they drove up and they lit him up, and it turned into a felony stop right there when they took him and the woman out of the minivan.
But I don't think there was any signs that was posted for no parking. Was there, Brian? I believe there was truck parking there. That was allowed. So
there was the sign.
Oh, there was?
Yeah, there was the sign.
But I
did not know that.
That's normally something that's allowed in Walmart parking lots, to my knowledge. They're normally okay with trucks parking there, correct?
Yeah, it is. It is a bit confusing now. Like like one of the ones that I remember most is in a place called Oak Grove, Missouri. There's a giant Walmart right there with like 3 great big truck stops. And so they put up physical barriers that are 8 feet tall. So you can't even get in.
Mm-hmm.
So most Walmarts, if they absolutely don't want these trucks in the parking lot, because it can be a big problem, they'll put up physical barriers to let everybody know, don't come in, don't bring the trucks in, because you physically can't get them in. And there are some Walmarts that don't want trucks in the parking lots, but Walmart has always been very permissive. If you read Sam Walton's biography, his autobiography, he loved his truckers.
Yeah,
he created his own trucking company, and it's one of the top 5 biggest companies in the world. And he also had Sam Walton. He also really cared about people that were traveling and people that were tired. And so he's been gone since 1992 or something when he passed on, but he's always allowed, not only truckers, but campers and, people that are hurting in general to sleep in his parking lot.
Right. That's something that's very well known about the Waltons and how they feel about that, which is why I asked the question. It seems like maybe just an oversight on their part, not trying to keep these predatory people out of their parking lots while allowing truck drivers and campers and tired folks and people down on their luck to utilize the parking spaces when the store is closed or when it's just very late hours. So I'm sorry that happened to you, Brian. Look, anything like that happens, especially when you get woken up in the middle of the night, is bad enough. But when somebody pulls a gun on you and threatens your safety over a crime that they're clearly committing, and then to add to that the police officers aren't going to help you at all, that just really is a head scratcher.
I also want to talk about that all across America, a lot of our police, many of them have become kind of useless across America, and they stand there and watch this thing going on and they think it's funny. And they're not actually interested in stopping these, these guys are driving this minivan that looked like it's not going to make it very far. Whereas we're driving this great big, beautiful, the 2024 Volvo. And we're pulling something that's valuable. And the police, it looks like they're looking at us thinking, okay, we're the ones that got the deep pockets. These other guys, are they going to be able to pay anything? Mm-hmm. Whereas a great big trucking company like us, of course we could pay something. So that bothered me. And replaying this incident in my mind over, the days and weeks afterward was that the police weren't really there to protect us or anything. They were there because they thought it was funny, and they were there thinking that they might get something out of us as well.
Yeah, I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but the first thing that comes into my mind when you tell me about how these officers acted is, are they on the take? Are they getting, if you do call and pay this $1,000 fee and this guy takes the thing off your windshield, how much of that $1,000 is going into the cops' pockets to keep this racket going? And, I've got no proof of that. Obviously, it's just a thought, but
that's suspicious.
It's definitely interesting because their motto is to serve and protect. And I don't feel like you were protected or served until somebody pulled out a firearm, which is way too late for them to act appropriately. And again, just sorry that this happened to you, and to make you replay it in your head. Like I said before we came on here, I know this probably isn't your favorite story to tell, but I think that we are getting a lot of lessons here for drivers that are listening on what to look for and how to handle this situation. You said that you called H&M immediately. I know that that's probably priority number one. Stacy, can you talk me through a little bit of the standard operating procedure like this? If you have another driver that is dealing with something like this, what are the exact steps that you want them to take now that you've experienced this?
I actually think that Brian handled this perfectly by calling in and then our on-call person having him turn around and call the police. I don't know any other way to get out of it or get away from it. He was in a dangerous situation that night.
You couldn't get away from them. And I want to point out, we didn't hardly mention this. There was another driver there. There was a dude he was either from Ukraine or from Poland or something. and he had his own independent company, and they did the same thing to him. They had two of us right there. Now, I'm not sure how he got his off. I think the police, they got the code. This device, it has a number pad on the side of it. I think somebody gave him the code. So the other driver, he left. I don't know how he got out of it, to be honest.
But somehow, I mean, maybe he paid him. You never know. They could have just called that number and given him what they wanted so that he could get on his way. And that's unfortunate. But, you know, you hear the term predatory towing practices, and some people will kind of turn an eyebrow up at that and think, well, that's a little bit heavy-handed to call it that. And I really don't think it is. I think this is absolutely predatory. The guy wouldn't be packing a gun otherwise. And it also makes me wonder, how do they get their hands on this type of equipment? I can't just go down to the hardware store and buy a boot, like a wheel boot, and go start putting it on people in the parking lot. I couldn't even do that if somebody was parked in my own driveway. So how is it?
You actually can buy those, because after this all came up, and I'd never heard of this barnacle thing. So I did a lot of Googling just to see what it was all about. And you can actually go online and buy them. I can't remember how expensive they are, but yeah, you can buy those. So it could, any Joe Blow that's got the money can go get one and make, $2,000-$3,000 a night, easy money.
That's ridiculous. That should be
ridiculous.
There should be some sort of legislation worked in around that. This seems like a law enforcement tool, and those shouldn't be readily available to the public, in my opinion.
Right. You would think they wouldn't be, but they are.
Wow. So, Brian, if you could give your fellow drivers at H&M and anyone else out there listening any advice on what you learned from this situation, what would it be? I mean, was there something that might have tipped you off if you'd have been looking for it, or was this just something where wrong place, wrong time?
Well, I mean, what could you do? If the parking lot was completely deserted and there are signs up saying don't park here because there's all kinds of enforcement. I mean, there are other dangers that we're facing right now. There are robbers out there. There are people that are targeting us for our cargo, and generally you want to park near other drivers for safety and make something of a corral and kind of keep an eye on each other. These guys, the robbers right here, they scored a double right here because they got these devices on both of ours. So I mean, what could I have done different to make sure that, I don't know. I mean, there was another driver there and I parked near his truck for safety. I mean, to be quite honest, the thought that I had afterward was, I don't know how much longer I want to do the truck driving thing. Because if I end up with a bullet hole, either top or bottom or in my lung or something, it's all over. So it's really bothered me since then.
I totally understand. I mean, it makes perfect sense. It bothers me just hearing you tell the story, and I wasn't involved at all. Yeah. I can't imagine how you probably feel.
Yeah. In general, I don't like parking at truck stops because truck stops are very noisy. They're not always they can be very dirty and noisy. And I like to park, I would say, just aim for rest areas. Rest areas are the very, very safest places to park. The bad guys, a lot of times they don't have that much fuel to go way out there to the countryside to go target trucks at the rest area. I've almost never had anything bizarre or dangerous happen specifically at an interstate rest area. So that's the lesson that I would pull from that. It's just always aim for those rest areas. Try to stay away from truck stops because there's a lot of toxic negativity over there for me. Try to aim for the rest areas. But, I do have to go to Walmart in order to get groceries in order to stay at the rest area. Invariably, I do have to go to the Walmart, and I don't have time to drive a car over there. I take either a truck and trailer or a bobtail. But, that's the best advice I can give anyone. Just aim for the rest areas.
Yeah. And be aware of your surroundings too. If there's a shady van parked out where nobody else is parked in the middle of the night like that, if you happen to see that, it might just be a good idea to head on down the road to the next one if you've got the availability to do so. And that's really unfortunate. You guys are just trying to work. I look at it, it's hard to relate to my job, but if I walked downstairs and there was a barnacle on my windshield right now, I would be in a very, very upset state of mind, and I probably wouldn't handle the situation nearly as well as you did, especially not if there was a gun involved. Like, this is all really enlightening. And I'm sorry that you had to go through this, Bryan, but I really appreciate you guys coming on to share this. And
sure.
Before I let you go, I just want to give Stacy one more chance. I know Bryan had a lot to say here, Stacy. Is there anything you want to add before we're out of time here about this situation or maybe preventing it in the future?
There's just always a scammer trying to figure out his next scam. You just got to kind of keep up with the times and figure out what direction they're coming from next. I mean, it's just always somebody trying to get money out of a trucking company, it seems like. So,
yeah,
everybody just needs to be safe. And like you said, pay attention to their surroundings.
For sure.
Yeah.
Great advice there. Well, Bryan, Stacy, I really appreciate the time here. I think that this has been a fantastic segment. I think that there's a lot of good stuff here that drivers can learn from. And, Bryan, I'll tell you, be safe out there, my friend. I hope that you don't come across this again.
Yes, I hope so too. Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bryan. And Stacy, thank you for being here. We really appreciate the time as well. We'll talk to you again soon, okay?
All right, sounds great. Thanks a lot.
Uh-huh.
All right, bye.
All right, drivers, just a couple of heads up for this coming weekend. The Route 66 Spring Fever Rally is in Depew, Oklahoma. That's the 28th through the 31st. And NASCAR is in Richmond for the Toyota Owners 400 on the 31st. Y'all keep it between the ditches, and I'll catch you on the flip-flop.
Joining me next here on the H&M Trucking Podcast, I've got another person that was involved with Bryan Allen's little predatory towing scheme that he fell victim to. With me now is Safety Claims Specialist Destinee Andrews from H&M Trucking. Destinee, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
When I told you that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this, one thing that you mentioned was that was one of the strangest 2 a.m. phone calls that I've ever gotten. Walk me through your take on this situation. What happened? Obviously, the call came in at 2 a.m. Let's start there.
Yeah, so I actually got a call from the after-hours dispatch, Kirk, and he kind of was like, I don't know exactly what's going on. He said somebody threw a boot on his windshield and is demanding all this money. I don't know what to do. So right away, got off the phone with him, got on the phone with Bryan. He said that this older minivan pulled up. They threw this boot on his windshield and were demanding all this money and saying that if they didn't get it, that he was going to break his windshield, because saying that he was parked illegally, which is incorrect, because Bryan was actually parked at a Walmart and there were signs all over the place saying parking permitted, and there were a bunch of other trucks around him. So this guy pretty much just cornered him and threw it on his windshield, started banging on his window saying, give me money or I'm going to break your windshield.
Yeah, and Bryan told us that he was holding a sign up in front of his face that just had the phone number on it that Bryan was supposed to call, and that the guy wouldn't answer any questions. And on top of it, that he had a gun. Like, this is so crazy to me. I totally understand why this is a crazy phone call to get at 2 a.m. So you're on the phone with Bryan. He's telling you about the situation. Where do you go from there?
So from there, I told him immediately get off the phone with me and call the police. So that's what he did. He had the police dispatched out. And then when he got there, I actually spoke to the police on the phone, and they said that what they were doing was completely legal and it was a civil matter. And I was like, how is this legal? He's parked legally. This guy, under what terms is this absolutely okay for him to be doing and demanding money when he's not doing anything wrong? Well, it turns out that Sam's Clubs and Walmarts all over the U.S., even if they say that parking is permitted, they can still get away with doing that. and it's totally legal.
Yeah, look, you're the one that talked to the cops here, so I trust in what you're saying. I don't think you're the one trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes here, but this sounds like the least legal thing that I've ever heard of. I mean, it's extortion for the most part. You see a company.
It sounds like
logo.
highway robbery.
Yeah, very literally, yes. And I mean, just because you see a big logo on the side of somebody's truck, like the H&M logo, you think that company's got a lot of money and I want some of it. And then the police will kind of show up. And Brian told me, too, that the police were actually kind of laughing at the situation and being very unprofessional from their standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. They didn't seem to really care to help Brian at all, except for the only thing that they did say is, oh, yeah, you could definitely just, rip this off your windshield and go.
Which is a safety issue right from the word go, because they know that it's going to break the windshield when he takes it off.
Oh, absolutely. They tried to show him a way to pop it off with causing minimal damage. They did do that, but the design of the boot, it's going to break the windshield no matter what.
Yeah, and there's one thing that a lot of people, obviously the drivers that we're talking to now, this doesn't go for them. They understand this, but it's not like overly hard to break a windshield. And I don't recommend anybody trying, but I had a friend in high school that was standing on someone's hood and the car lurched forward and they fell back with their butt on the windshield and broke the entire windshield out of a Honda Civic. It's not that hard to do. And these contraptions, these barnacles, as we've heard them called, are designed to do exactly that. Like, they are going to stay on there unless you break the windshield or unless you have the code to take them off. And I'm just... How did you react to the cops when they were basically telling you that, hey, we can't do anything about this? Like, were you kind of raising hell, or were you really confused? What was going on in your head?
Oh, I was pissed off because, I mean, thinking of it as in the best way of the company, over the road, a new windshield on one of those trucks cost about $2,000.
Uh-huh.
Now, in Omaha, we can get it for significantly less. He was not anywhere near the shop. So now the guy that was demanding money was demanding about $1,300 or something like that, a very high price point. So pretty much almost the same price as a windshield. Mm-hmm. So, and the cops, they just were completely unhelpful. They didn't do anything. All they did was stand there and watch the situation. And I don't know how this is legal. I don't know how they found a loophole in the system to say that, oh yeah, this is completely legal and they can do this to anybody. It's just absolutely crazy to me. And I don't know why nothing has been done about it.
Well, and I said this before when I was talking to Brian and Stacy, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not a tinfoil hat guy, but this sounds a lot like if I was making a Netflix series, I would be like, oh yeah, the cops are on the take. That's easy. Those two dots connect. The cops are going to get a couple $100 a piece for not messing with this guy and letting him run his racket, and everybody's going to go home happy except for the driver. I don't have any proof of that being the case, but it sure would make sense in a situation like this.
Yeah, I honestly wouldn't doubt it, but I don't know if they're clearly in that area. This is something that they're very well aware of.
Right.
That this is a problem, that this is happening. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you do about it? Why hasn't anybody done anything about it?
Well, there are some states in the union that are sort of starting to do something about it. We're going to talk actually here in the next segment. There is a story that I'll tell you out of Memphis, Tennessee, where one towing company in particular has been they've actually been stripped of their ability to boot vehicles by the local government there because they were charging exorbitant amounts. They were towing people not very far and charging them $5,000 to get their truck back. And it's finally started to be looked into. But I feel like, something else I mentioned to Brian and Stacy, why are common individuals like myself and you able to go online and purchase one of these contraptions? And, we did a little bit of research into it after I talked to Brian and Stacy, and it's like, you can you don't even have to buy one of these things. You can basically subscribe to the usage of it for like $250 a month. I mean, it's not even cost preventative to go out and be a criminal right now. And that, to me, that's not okay. That's way out of the lines as far as what should be legal. And especially when we know that they're preying on these trucking companies, because these trucking companies make a bunch of money. They have a bunch of money coming through, and a lot of them have so many drivers that it's hard for them to keep tabs on things like this.
Exactly. Well, we notate everything. That's my job.
Right. So tell me from your standpoint, Destinee, and I know that in talking to Bryan and Stacy, Stacy told me she thought Bryan did everything correctly. She thought that he handled the situation perfectly as far as, nobody having any experience with it and just kind of hoping it didn't happen until it did. It seemed like he was pretty well prepared. From your standpoint as the safety claims specialist, what would you like drivers to know if something like this ever happens to them? What should the protocol be, and what should they do out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So anytime any sort of incident, emergency happens, they need to call the on-call safety cell phone. That cell phone lives with either myself or Dean all the time, 24/7, 365 days. Somebody is always going to answer at the end of that phone call. If something like that happens, call me, notify me immediately, so I can start getting information. Where are you located at? What kind of, are you hauling a load? Is it a hazmat load? It gives me a time to pull information. After I've been notified, immediately call the police. Police need to get out there, because if police wouldn't have been there and let's say Bryan would have gotten shot, I don't know what I would have done. That would have been the worst case scenario, something that could have been totally prevented. Having the police there to at least protect you is everything. We can figure all the rest out later, but at least having a officer involved and monitoring the situation is everything. He absolutely did handle everything correctly. As soon as he got off the phone with the police and police for dispatch, he got right back on the phone with me, was in contact with me, constantly letting me know what they were doing so I could document everything, which helps in filling out the police report and everything like that. And, once I also was able to speak with officers, they were kind of able to give me a little bit more insight. From there, they're saying, he can go ahead and pull this off. It's totally legal. So he did. After the situation, I told him he needs to leave and go to a safe haven, which he absolutely did. Mm-hmm. Every step of the way, Bryan did that correctly. It's mainly just keeping in contact with somebody constantly, having authorities there so they can monitor the situation, because that very quickly can escalate into a fatality.
Yeah, you're right. And, you already kind of mentioned this in a little bit different context, but I'm just going to say it as clear as day. Every piece of equipment on that truck can be replaced except for the driver. And
exactly.
It's so important that, of course, you drivers that are listening to this, you guys know you deal with all of these dangers, whether they be in traffic or weather or, safety and security when you're parked at night. You deal with this stuff all the time, and so you know that you have to look out for yourself as well as all of the equipment. And I just hats off to Bryan in handling the situation the way that he did. I can see this situation, especially with the type of guy that Bryan was dealing with here, this can escalate to panic in no time. So it's important. I mean, we're sitting here talking about it, patting Bryan on the back, saying he did a good job. We're telling this story so that next time, whenever this happens, the next driver can hopefully take a deep breath and handle it the same way that Bryan did.
Exactly. Him keeping calm was probably the best. It played in his favor in this situation. And I know some drivers out there have short fuses and quick temper. Him keeping his composure and not overreacting to the situation did a huge number on helping the situation and not making it any worse than it already was. He was not combative. He was cooperating with me, the police, not having confrontation with the other guy. He got to a safe place, and luckily he wasn't hurt. And that was ultimately, like you said, that was our biggest concern. Trucks, equipment, whatever. I can replace that. We cannot replace valuable drivers.
Right. So now I got to turn this to you real quick and ask, how hard was it for you to stay calm? Because I assume you'd not dealt with anything quite of this nature before.
Yeah, that was definitely probably one of the most serious situations since I've started with H&M that I've had to deal with. For a minute, exactly what I should do. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a hold of anybody up in upper management to see if there is something in particular I was supposed to do. So I just went off of what's the best instinct, what's going to keep my driver safe, and what is going to get him out of the situation. So, and that's what I told him to do. You know, go ahead, take the boot off. If it breaks your windshield, that's fine. Get out of there, get to a safe haven, get somewhere safe, get away from the situation. I want you safe. I don't care about the windshield. I'll replace that later. I want to make sure you're okay. And that was my top priority.
And kudos to you for being able to stay calm, because if a phone call rings in at 2 a.m. in the morning at my house, calm is the furthest thing from my mind. So I say hats off to you, Destinee, and Brian and Stacy as well for dealing with this situation with professionalism and patience and honesty. It's been great to hear this story. I'm glad you guys are willing to share it with us. I really hope that this is the last time anybody has to deal with this. Based on some of the news coverage I've seen and some of the other incidents I've heard about, it kind of makes me feel like it's only a matter of time until the next one happens. But at least you guys have some preparedness and some experience now that you can build off of.
Absolutely. And all we can do is best prepare our drivers the best way that we can, is getting the word out.
There you go. Well, Destinee, thank you so much for coming on here and spending the time with us today. As the safety claims specialist at H&M, you're one of the people I hope that we don't have to talk to, but I'm very glad when we do get to talk to you, because it normally means that there's a lesson involved. So thanks again for your time today, and we'll be in touch on the next one, all right?
Sounds great. Thanks, Marcus.
After a long day of driving, you're tired and hungry. With fewer and fewer good restaurants out there, what are your options? Fast food again? Something from the roller grill? Another cold sandwich? Hey, believe it or not, you can cook on the truck. Okay, it's not what Grandma would make, not a gourmet meal, but it'll be better, cheaper, and probably healthier than anything you can buy in the truck stop. And I'm here to show you how. Welcome to the Big Rig Cafe.
Hey drivers, today on Bill's Big Rig Cafe, we're making sausage Creole. Again, it's not going to be as good as home. It's not as grandma's kitchen, or if you go to New Orleans or something, but hey, it's a lot better than eating a hamburger or something off the roller grill. So first of all, gather up the stuff you need. Sausage, any kind of link sausage, smoked sausage will do. You can use raw sausage if you cook it long enough. You're going to need some frozen onion and frozen bell pepper. They come in packed with both, if you don't mind, yellow and red, along with your green pepper. Fajita mix also works. You just put enough in the crock pot to line the bottom. You're going to need a big can of diced tomatoes. That's like 28-ounce can. I use Rotel, but you can just add a little more plain diced tomatoes if you don't like the kick. That's a 10-ounce can. Then we got the Tony, I think it's Chacheri, but Tony Cacheras, or however you say this Creole seasoning, some kind of rice, minute rice, or this is really easy, these tubs of rice-a-roni, some bottled water for your rice, then crackers or cornbread. Not going to cover that on this episode. I'll teach you how to make cornbread on the truck at a later date. You're going to want a crock pot liner. I've already put one in here. That's kind of like these. You can get them at Walmart or anywhere. You're going to need paper towels and some wipes. Some kind of wipes to help clean up the mess. There's not much mess if you do this right, okay? And you want some small storage containers. I like the kind with a screw-on lid, but, Tupperware basically kind of stuff. Small, about what you would eat. So that way it's individually proportioned. Okay, so let's get started. Already got the rice and the pepper here. Just like I said, you spread out enough to put in the bottom of the crock pot. Just kind of cover the bottom. Then you slice up your sausage, and that's not hard. You just cut it into bite-sized pieces. We're going to throw that in there. Okay, here we go. Now dump in the sausage. Put your tomatoes in. Put your Tony Chacheri or whatever you call this stuff. Got a little kick to it. Gives that good old Cajun flavor. Let's sort of mix everything up real good in here. Put the lid on it. Turn it on for, how long are you driving today? If you want to eat in about 4 hours, you put it on high. If you're going to be driving a long day, put it on low. Cook it for about 8 hours, maybe 6 hours. If you use smoked sausage, everything's pretty much cooked anyway. Turn this dude on. I like this kind of crock pot that's got these lockdown things, if you can see those. Because that way your lid's not going to fly off. I put mine in a corner and use 2 or 3 bungee cords to make sure this thing isn't going to move, because just as sure as you think you're not going to have to hit the brakes hard, you're going to wind up with this stuff all over the cab of your truck. So just make sure it's secure. Drive down the road. Try not to take the lid off, because it's going to start smelling good in a little while. Leave that lid on for 4 hours if you're on high, 6 to 8 hours if you're on low, and we'll come back in a little bit and tell you what to do when it gets ready to serve.
Hey, here's a quick little tip for you. Paper bowls, paper plates. I personally don't like the plastic utensils. I keep knives and forks and stuff and spoons on the truck, but you can use them if you want to. Kind of my philosophy is the less mess, the better. So, you can toss a paper plate or a paper bowl. If you are going to use a paper bowl for something like rice or soup, you might double it, because they tend to get wet on the bottom and might bust when you pick them up, take them out of the microwave, and that's a huge mess. All right, there's a tip for you. Enjoy.
All right, so you drove all day, you got this stuff cooking, it's been smelling so good, you're just dying to dig into it. You've done your post trip, probably went to the bathroom, took dog for a walk, now it's time to finish this up. Okay, here we go. Pretend this is in the minute rice box, but that's what this is. I always kept a 1/4 cup measuring thing on the truck to make a single serving, for me anyway. It's just 2 scoops of minute rice, or you could use the rice-a-roni, that's easier. Then 2 scoops of water, bottled water, I always had bottled water on the truck. 2 1/4 cups anyway. Then you just stir that up, stick it in your microwave for probably about 3 minutes. We'll be back in a second.
Well, I like to show you things to cook on the truck, but there are a few good restaurants still out there. And since this is Bill's Big Rig Cafe, I'm going to start with one of Bill Martin's favorites, and that would be the Gas Grill. You'll find it in Knightstown, Indiana, I-70, just east of Indianapolis, exit 115. I have never, ever had a bad meal at the Gas Grill. Check it out sometime.
Okay, microwave just beeped at me, so get that out. Here's what it looks like. Just fluff that up a little bit. It looks like it's done. Then we get to dig into this. Oh, that's smelling good. All right, can you see that? It's time to chow down. Let me eat, then I'll come back and show you how to clean up this mess. It's easy.
Hey, here's another tip for you if you're cooking. One thing I always keep on the truck is this Tony Cacheres is how I used to say it, but then my son Zach, who's also a truck driver, he drives heavy equipment in the oil field, he said it's Chacheri. So anyway, but it's a Creole seasoning, and it's got the stuff that you start with, or at least I start with for most things. Whether I'm cooking Mexican food or Italian food, it's got most of those things in it already. Salt, red pepper, black pepper, chili powder, garlic powder. So it's got the base on there. Then you can add more cumin and chili powder if you're going Mexican. Or, you could add more oregano and basil and things like that if you're going Italian. But this is the base. It's just a good overall seasoning. It's Tony Chacheri. Hope I got that right. Anyway, Creole seasoning. You'll find it on the spice aisle. By the way, I don't get paid to push this stuff.
Well, thanks for letting me eat first. By the way, Dawn said it was a little spicy, and yeah, it is. You can either use plain tomatoes and not use the Rotel, or you can use a little bit less of the Creole seasoning that I told you about. Either one of them will bring that down, but I kind of like it spicy. Anyway, now that we finished and it's cooled a little bit, I went ahead and took the rest out, and I put it in these containers. You can get these type of containers just about anywhere. But those keep in your refrigerator for, I don't know, probably a week, so you can make it again. Or if you're lucky enough, like our H&M drivers, we get a freezer. You stick it up in the freezer, and then you can thaw it out, a couple of weeks from now and have it again. So anyway, there we go. Got it all out of there. If you've been careful with this liner and you didn't poke a hole in it, you bring that out, put that in the trash, and looky there. Pretty much no mess, but just to make sure, take your little heavy wipe it out real good. Now, before you stick the lid on and clamp everything shut again, you want to let it dry out real good. And be sure to get this, because this didn't have the liner on it. So be sure to do a real good job with your lid, get that good and clean so you're ready for next time. So, that really about covers it. If you had any more mess, you could wipe it out with this, but luckily we didn't poke any holes in the thing. That's Sausage Creole. Catch you next time.
Thanks for joining me for dinner here in the Big Rig Cafe. Do you have a favorite dish that you prepare on the truck? Do you know of a great place to eat out there on the road that's still around? Any questions, suggestions, or comments? I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to catch me next week for another on-the-road dinner here in the Big Rig Cafe.
Great stuff there from Brian, from Stacy, and from Destinee. Really appreciate those guys coming on and telling that story. I know it's not an easy one to tell, and wow, just really kind of blown away by how that whole thing unfolded. Love hearing these stories. If you have a similar story or just one that you want to tell, make sure to get in touch with Sherry Vogler or Eve Essery over at the main terminal there, and they will put you in touch with me so that you can come on the podcast and tell your story. Let's get to this. Little breaking news on the topic. This is coming out of Memphis, Tennessee. I'm getting this news story from Channel 3 WREG in Memphis. And this is crazy. I'm just going to read you some excerpts here. Memphis's chief legal officer says the state of Tennessee and the U.S. Postal Service are looking into the activities of A1's towing and hauling. In November, the Memphis Transportation Commission suspended A1's towing and hauling booting and towing permits for 30 days after receiving several complaints from truck drivers who claimed they were illegally booted and towed by A1's towing and charged thousands of dollars to get their semi-trucks back. Deputy City Attorney Michael Fletcher said that A1's has since been cited for more violations and will have another hearing before the permits office. Fletcher said the state and Postal Service are also investigating the towing company. Here's a quote from Fletcher. Quote, one of the trucks they took was a Postal Service truck. They've subpoenaed information from us, and the state is also looking at it because there are some enforcement arms the state has that we don't have. And that's end quote, by the way, but fist pump for Mr. Fletcher there. Because I love the fact that the city's not trying to just take this over and say, no, this is our case. Hey, if the state and even a federal entity like the U.S. Postal Service want to look into it, I say let them, because we're going to clean these guys off the streets a lot quicker that way. Fletcher and Permits Administrator Yolanda Fullalove both appeared before the City Council Committee on Tuesday last week. Council members have asked the Permits Office to create a set of rules and regulations for tow truck companies that can be posted on the city's website to eliminate bad actors in the industry. I think that's a great step, okay? But it is just a step. You can post all the rules that you want to. There are still going to be some ne'er-do-wells and miscreants out there that do whatever they want to, and they don't give a damn about the rules. Starting out, though, you need to establish these rules. And it's clear that the towing industry is kind of just the wild, wild west right now. Are you parked illegally? Hey, it's all right. We'll boot it, tow it, and charge you $5,000 to get the truck back. A truck that you need to do your job. A truck that may have thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars in cargo in the back that somebody is expecting to be delivered at some point in time. It's just not okay. If we let this continue to perpetuate, it'll be to the point where truckers will be defending their trucks by any means necessary. And I'll just leave it at that because, look, the story doesn't get any better from there. City Councilman for Memphis, Ford Canale, said he continues to get complaints about A1's towing and hauling and doesn't understand how they're still allowed to operate in Memphis. Quote, I don't know what needs to be done, colleagues, but we can't continue to let people get preyed upon in our city and feel threatened and have to pay exorbitant fees that go far beyond what we passed in our ordinance. But something's got to be done. Last month, the owner of a trucking company out of Florida contacted Councilman Canale and WREG after A1's towed his big rig from a truck stop on Lamar. Jaleel Shaw with S Greenlight Trucking admits he didn't see the pay to park signs, but said he was bullied by several armed men and forced to pay nearly $2,700 to get his truck released. There's one part of these stories that keeps coming up and keeps making these red flags fly up in my head, and that is the armed part. You are a towing company. You are not a security service. You are not law enforcement. I believe in everyone's right to carry a gun in this country. I believe in the Second Amendment. I own my own guns. You know what I don't do? I don't go out and commit crimes that amount to extortion and then bully people with said guns into falling in line with those things that I'm doing to them. This is extortion. If it's not extortion by every word of the law, it very much so borders on extortion. And here I've got a point from another councilman, Chase Carlisle. He says Memphis is a heavy logistics town, and he also said he was afraid A1's business practices were going to drive truckers away. Here's a quote. You were talking about sales tax, gas tax, hotel motel bed tax. All of those things start to have a downward problem for us. I'm going to step way out of line here, and I know we're talking more civil at this point, but from a criminal standpoint, it borders on racketeering, which is how the mob made their money. All right? Nobody's ever gotten an honest living out of racketeering, okay? Now, A1's attorney, of course, was present for these hearings, and they did have a short response to this, which I think is laughable at best. The attorney representing A1's towing and hauling said he disagreed with council members' assessment on the company. Quote, can you explain how towing and booting illegal parkers is racketeering? That was Daryl O'Neill, again, the attorney representing A1's. I'll tell you how it is, Mr. O'Neill. It's racketeering when they start to arm themselves and threaten people over exorbitantly high fees. Everyone knows that there was not $2,700 worth of labor that went into booting that guy's truck and towing it. And if there is, you need to go hire some new tow truck drivers because they don't charge that much by the hour. I happen to know a couple of them, and they're good guys. In fact, during a snowstorm here in Eugene, they'll come and pull you out for free. On New Year's Eve here in Eugene, they will tow your car from whatever bar you black out at and give you a ride home. And many times they'll do it for a flat fee of like $50. Tow truck drivers are being given a bad name by this predatory arm of the industry. Getting back to the story here, council members said they plan to meet with people in the towing industry to get their feedback on a set of record rules and regulations. Canale said the rules won't stop those already violating city ordinances, but they will put other companies on notice. He says, quote, do I think this is enough? No, it's going to take legal action. A number of trucking companies from across the country have threatened to sue A1's. A1's Towing has also taken legal action of its own. Last year, A1's filed a lawsuit against the city of Memphis, the Memphis police chief, and multiple MPD officers accusing them of, quote, weaponizing a civil municipal ordinance to discriminate against the minority-owned towing company, end quote. Look, I think without being completely short-sighted here, I think that is a real easy way for them to try to wiggle their way out of something that they've been doing for a long time. Weaponizing a municipal ordinance, you, the towing company, are weaponizing your service. And do you know how I know that? Because your servicemen are carrying weapons. I don't think that this is a very hard pill to swallow for the towing companies. I think that ones that abide by the law and give honest, true service, especially to truck drivers, would probably be more than happy to have some laws go on the books, because guess what? They're not going to get the same reaction from a lot of drivers that they get now who are automatically on the defense because they think somebody is going to charge them an arm and a leg to take a boot off of their truck when they accidentally parked illegally. Look, if parking illegally is a violation of the law that you can pack around a gun and force people to do things they don't want to do against their will for, then lock me up. I was a serial offender at a parking lot in college. I had so many damn unpaid tickets by the time I finally got out of college that I had to take out a small loan to pay them. That was my fault. I was just fine paying those fines. I was being a dumb, neglectful, idiotic college student. These truckers are not that. These guys will follow the laws, okay? You drivers out there listening right now, you all know you're looking for a legal, safe place to park where you can crash for a little bit, get up, and continue doing your job. You're not out there trying to exploit anyone or anything. I would venture a guess that 98% of the time you see a driver parked illegally, he didn't know that it was illegal, or maybe he was trying to get away with it. Maybe it was something that it's like hours of service are up. I don't have any personal conveyance left on my clock. It's time for me to shut it down, and they shut it down where they can. But that does not open them up. Even if they are parked illegally, give them a parking ticket and tell them to move. They're with their truck most of the time. They're sleeping in it. Can you guys tell that this just really gets under my skin? I am not okay with people exploiting drivers and trucking companies. It makes me wonder if they understand what would happen. These guys that put these barnacles on people's windshield. Do you understand what happens if you break enough truck windshields? You get enough trucks out of service? You're not going to be able to fill your dumpy minivan with gas because there's not going to be any gas at the gas station because the goddamn truck couldn't get it there because you broke his windshield with a barnacle in the Walmart parking lot. I think I've made myself pretty clear about how I feel about this. I hope that we can affect some sort of change with this podcast. That's all I'm ever talking about. And even if that change has nothing to do with legislation that might curb this type of behavior, I hope that telling Brian's story and Stacy's story and Destiny's story in dealing with this whole thing helps you as a driver be more prepared for it should it happen to you in the future. We've all got our fingers crossed that that will not be the case, but stay vigilant, drivers, because you just never know who's out there waiting for you in a parking lot. All right. Big deep breath. I'm done. I'm not going to be angry about this anymore until it happens again to an H&M driver. Then I'm going to come completely unglued. But thank you all for being here today, for listening. Thank you to Bryan Allen, Stacy Trively, and Destinee Andrews for sharing their story. Not an easy one to tell. Brian, he had a gun pointed at him. That's not cool. It's just not. You don't point the business end of a gun at anything that you don't intend to destroy by a rule of thumb. And that guy pointed it at Brian, which is, I'm sorry. I really am. I am very sorry that Brian had to go through that, but I really appreciate him coming on and telling his story on this podcast today, as well as Stacy Trively and Destinee Andrews. As I mentioned, you guys were phenomenal. Hopefully we all learned something today. Thank you for Denny Stone and the Big Rig Cafe. A little bit of a cooking lesson for you as well. It's been a fun episode, but we got to wrap it up because I got to go and park illegally and see if I can get somebody to boot my car so I can lose my mind in a parking lot. Stay fresh, cheese bags. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the H&M Trucking Podcast. Please leave a review, subscribe, and connect with Marcus over at the H&M Trucking social media channels. And if you're considering a job at H&M, find us at hmtrucking.com. Until next time, stay safe and ahead of the curve drivers.